G'day guys and gal. Everyone always points out the various mistakes the Emperor has made, or the various plot points that if they went slightly differently could have made the setting overall way less grimdark. People speak about it in hopeful tones, as if they wish that the Imperium's goals all succeeded and mankind entered into their absolute golden age. With anyone who really sabotaged the Imperium and the Emperor getting a lot of hate, such as Erebus, Magnus, or the Emperor himself. That dude really was his worst enemy. But what if everything actually went great? What if the Primarchs went scattered, the Emperor was a good dad, and there was no Horus Heresy? Well, the extensively written fanfic Imperium Ascendent answers these questions by creating a 28 chapter series, so I thought it would be cool to dive into this and offer up some of my own insights if this was actually a potential realistic outcome. Before we get started, some habits are harmless, like punching your mate who collects tau. Others, not so much. That's where Fume comes in. It's not a vape, not a gimmick. It's a flavored air device that gives you something satisfying to reach for without any of the nasty stuff. No vapor, no nicotine, no chemicals. Just natural, great tasting air you suck on down. My go-to flavor is crisp mint. It gives you that fresh chewing gum or mouthwash sort of feeling. But there's heaps of other awesome flavors to choose from, and you can always just easily rotate through them. It's not all just about sucking. Fume doubles as a premium fidget device. It's sleek, portable, and you can literally use it anywhere. Over 500,000 people have added Fume to their daily routine. So if you wanted to join them, now is the time. Use code Majorkill or scan the QR code on screen to get a free Fume topper when you grab the Journey Pack. If you want something fun to suck on without being judged, this is it. Cheers to Fume for sponsoring this video. Today we'll go over the Imperium Ascendent story, highlighting the changes from canon to this version, as well as its key and best moments. Let's get into it. Imperium Ascendent is basically what if the Emperor didn't have turbo autism and also managed to read the Horus Heresy series before he even kicked off the Great Crusade. It takes the moment where everything goes to absolute shit in canon, rejects it, and says, nah, we winning this shit. The vibe isn't grimdark, it's noble bright, with just as much violence and a lot more triumph. You still get demons, heretics, and apocalyptic genocide, just with a big E who doesn't give his son's daddy issues. The fanfic story, written by J Fiction, opens in the Primarch vaults, set during the period where the Primarchs were still just little babies gestating. A force of wordbearers led by Argyll Tull and shepherded by the warper bitch Ingathel travel back in time to crash the party and sabotage the Primarch gestation capsules and kick off the whole scattering the babies and ruin the galaxy sort of thing. Just like what happens in canon during the first heretic novel. But then a second warp rift opens that doesn't look like your standard chaos fist hole. It appears righteous, burning with holy fire. Out marches the Legion of the Damned, the Emperor's own demonic space marines, and they are there to fuck. The sheer epicness of their presence, radiating the Emperor's own might, instantly banishes Ingathel. A brutal close quarters gunfight breaks out around the gestation capsules of the Primarchs. Argyll Tull tries to big brain it, knowing that scattering the Primarchs isn't an option anymore, but shooting a baby Primarch with a bolt shell still is. He takes a shot at Guilliman's pod, but a damned Legionnaire steps in front and takes it instead. This is repeated throughout the fight. Shots are taken at loyalist babies, but are tanked by the damned. The wordbearers have been slaughtered, so Argyll attempts to retreat back to his own timeline to warn Lorgar of these events. However, an undead damned Aquilon, the custodian who Argyll Tull betrayed and slew despite them being close as brothers can be, emerges and slays Argyll, getting revenge. Yes, the fanfic is full of these very satisfying, if not slightly forced moments. Then later, we get the second half of the Keystone, the other event which creates the setup for the fanfic's existence. When the Emperor visits the aftermath of this battle, he approaches this righteous warp rift and walks on through. It puts him face to face with the God Emperor of the 41st millennium, and then he is then shown a highlight reel, or to be honest more of a lowlight reel, the corpse throne, the last church, the decayed Imperium wheezing along like an inbred chain smoker. He meets a soul shard of Sanguinius that was bound to the Emperor upon his death to Horus, eats a big bag of here's where you fucked up, and then steps back into his own timeline. Seconds later, energized, enlightened, and suddenly a present father. It reads as if the corpse god Emperor from the 41st millennium has given up on his own timeline and uses his psychic death scream to try create a new one, granting his wisdom, energy, and very reality to the past Emperor as a desperate attempt to try again in a different timeline. From that moment, the younger Emperor starts actively parenting the Primarchs and starts building systems that won't implode the first time Erebus has a wank. He reads as a lot more naive and open than canon, shocked by his future status as a corpse god, as if it wasn't something he could have ever considered. Remember that this time the Primarchs are never scattered due to the Legion of the Damned stopping the wordbearers from scattering them. Also, we did need to note this fanfic was written about 8 years ago, so before Erdar and her role in the scattering occurred. So you have non-scattered Primarchs and an Emperor that realizes he needs to do things differently. The biggest overall change, aside from the two key events above, is the Emperor himself. Post-Vision, he's still the absolute unit we know and love, but now he's emotionally present, he talks to his sons, he explains things, he doesn't try to brute force a secular religion while acting like a god. He sets ideals, expectations, and guardrails. He still hates chaos, he still hates the warp's bullshit, and he's still a devout atheist, but he stops treating his closest allies like morons that can't be trusted with the truth. He tells the legions and the Imperium of Chaos and how much they suck, something Malcador wanted the Emperor to do in canon, and something that is often cited as the Emperor's greatest mistake. But I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. Other changes include the Emperor spending a lot more time on the Primarch project. He considered removing the human, flawed part of each Primarch that was corruptible but changed his mind, as that would have made them more or less automatons. Instead, he bound the souls of the Primarchs together in an active brotherhood. It would now be near impossible for each Primarch to betray their brothers, as it would be like betraying themselves. If at least one Primarch stayed true, they all would. The Emperor also no longer culls the Thunder Warriors at Mount Ararat. Instead, he allows them to die off in battle, no longer replenishing them. The few survivors are reassigned and treated as veteran heroes of old. Arik Tyrannus, the greatest of the Thunder Warriors, is taken in as one of the Emperor's advisors, but not before punching the Emperor in the face for putting himself and his men through so much pain. The punch was strong enough to shatter a tank, as Arik is revealed to be near Primarch strength, more or less the Primarch of the Thunder Warriors, but the Emperor is barely fazed and almost respects it. The last church scene, when the Emperor takes the form of a normal man and debates with an old priest at the last remaining church on Terra, happens a bit differently. The Emperor in this version isn't this condescending man who pokes holes in all the priest's beliefs. Although the Emperor tries a different tactic with the priest, hoping to save him and the priest to join him, the outcome is the same, as the Emperor still has the same goals. He wishes to unite Terra into a secular, eternal empire free of gods and superstition. He just wants to do it right this time. Despite this, the priest still disagrees with him, so instead of letting the priest walk back into his burning church, the Emperor gives him a quick, merciful death. The story goes over the childhood of the Primarchs, presenting their rivalries as a lot healthier and their personalities devoid of all resentment, mistrust, and daddy issues. It also does highlight that Chaos is still trying to cause issues. The ruinous powers are furious that this timeline's Emperor seems to be outplaying them at every turn and denying them their victories. They send in demon-possessed agents to try corrupt or harm the Primarch children. However, the Emperor and his forces are too alert and manage to intercept and destroy each and every infiltration attempt. Something interesting to note is that the Emperor is really taking his time now. He is in no rush to enter the Great Crusade or conquer the galaxy. He even removes the Primarch's rapid aging, allowing them to fully experience childhood, which goes a long way to making them more well-adjusted. The Emperor knows everything that happened in the canonical timeline, so spends a lot of time with each of his sons, especially the originally traitor ones, and ensures he preemptively addresses the flaws that caused their falls in the first place, i.e. making sure Lorgo wasn't so fanatical and dogged. It's really wholesome. You see Primarchs who hate each other in canon lore for their similarities now embrace each other for the same reasons. For example, in canon, Conrad and Sanguinius despise each other despite both having foresight. However, now Sanguinius comforts Conrad as a brother, helping him through his dark visions. The Treaty of Olympus with Mars plays out mostly the same, as that part of the canon timeline was actually really well played by the Emperor. The only difference is that he is extra cautious to respect Mars, doing a lot more to keep them loyal and placing more secret safeguards to watch for potential betrayals. This lack of rushing also allows the Emperor to fix a lot of the issues with the original legions. The Thousand Sons no longer have the flesh change, the Word-Bearers are more moderate, the World Eaters are more tame. All recruits are also now Terran, not flooded with members from the canonical homeworlds of the legions, so they are a lot more unified. All legions also have different names now, not necessarily their original names from canon either. For example, the Space Wolves are now called the Wild Hunt, and they do not have links to Fenris anymore. He also made Space Marines much more well-rounded and more prepared for a galaxy without war, thus removing the potential need to purge them when the galaxy was at peace. He also fortified them significantly more against chaos. A lot of this lost time is made up for by the fact that all 20 Primarchs and their legions leave Terra together. The overwhelming force crushes all resistance in the Sol system. However, Chaos wasn't just going to lie down and take it. It wasn't going to be like, welp, the Emperor got us, and not try a new solution. That attempt would be during the Lunar Crusade, as well as the Battle of Ceres. The Emperor's legions were preparing to leave their home system and strike out into the galaxy. However, there was a Chaos cult that grew powerful on Luna. It was not foreseen by the Emperor, as this did not happen in canon. A great Chaos ritual was performed, and Chaos was cum-blasted into the minds of every Astartes and Primarch. It was a crude ritual, more of a brute force, but it did have quite the effect. A small percentage of Space Marines, mostly the weak-willed ones, were overwhelmed and became pawns of chaos. Many menials and soldiers did as well. The Emperor spoke through his Primarch sons, telling them how this was the enemy he had warned them against and that they must resist. Fighting broke out on every ship as many warp portals and rifts opened up in the Sol system. At a similar time, Chaos agents attempted mass assassination efforts against the Primarchs, all of which were thwarted with the help of the Legion of the Damned. Chaos basically decided to blow its load all in one go. It could not carefully craft a heresy or slowly corrupt the legions, it would need to expend its entire might, catch the entire Imperial army and defeat it in one epic move. It would kill this new Imperium in its infancy, at least it would try. The Imperium would win the space battle, the disorganized Chaos forces being no match for the Emperor and his Primarchs, with the Imperium himself psychically closing the warp rifts. However, the Siege of Luna itself would be a much more hectic battle. That chapter was long and involved some actually pretty hectic shit. It makes it clear that while the Horus Heresy was like a game for the Chaos Gods, Imperium Ascendent features a desperate Chaos putting in their full effort. In one scene, Horus gets cum-blasted by all 4 Chaos Gods, who flood his mind with visions of his betrayal in canon. They make him horrified at himself, but this is a different Horus. Instead of giving in, he impales himself with a holy spear, choosing death over betrayal. He would actually survive, but the act itself was pretty noble. The Emperor himself gets involved, leading a force of Silver Knights, who are a more refined Grey Knight, finally crushing the forces of Chaos and purging Luna. The legions were now free to strike out into the galaxy. Chaos had blown its load and was now fearful for the first time in its long existence, constantly now on the defense. World after world falls to the new Imperium. Everything is better. There are now more Sisters of Silence. The Silver Knights are publicly known as heroes. All Primarchs and legions are ascendant. The Inquisition is formed, but not out of desperation. It's called the Gold Order and has all the benefits without the drawbacks of the Canonical Inquisition. The setting is extremely noble bright. Each Primarch has a moment to shine. All play to their strengths. All the traitor Primarchs have their moments of redemption from their canon timeline. All the while the Emperor's power continues to grow. However, the Imperium Ascendant and the huge battle in the Sol system had woken up many of mankind's future enemies early. The Great Crusade features wars against Necron dynasties, and even an early Tyranid fleet arrives in system and is crushed. The Elder and the Imperium form an alliance against the greater threats, both past, present, and future. There's even a scene of Lorgar and Corvus purging a Chaos force together, a final cherry to the wholesome cake. That is more or less where the story ends, as the author moved on and never actually finished it properly. An epilogue briefly details how powerful Imperium Ascendant has become. It spans most of the galaxy, all its enemies are crushed, routed, or in hiding. The Astronomicon covers the entire galaxy. The Mechanicus produces wondrous technologies that grant humanity huge boons in all areas. The Imperial cult is still formed, but in a much more moderate fashion. No zealous worship, more like reverence, as if the Emperor was Jesus instead of God. The tale ends with the Emperor finally going to begin his Webway project, with the blessing of most of the Elder, whilst Horus and Rogel prepare to break the Orcs at Ulanor. Yes, there will still be threats, such as the Tyranids, Necrons, and a potential resurgence of Chaos, who are licking their wounds but still trying to rise up. But the Imperium is so united, powerful, and has such strong foundations, combined with the fact that it's led by immortals who can eternally lead it, that there really doesn't seem like much anyone can do to challenge it. So what are my thoughts? Is this lore friendly? Would the Emperor actually be able to achieve such a mega noble bright outcome if he knew about the events of the heresy ahead of time? Well, Imperium Ascendant was more or less his dream vision, his golden path to glory. It is the outcome he most desired and worked towards. He just fucked it up a lot in canon. However, something I will say is that in canon, it's often implied that the Emperor was in a rush and was actively choosing the best paths forward that he could. It's almost like he was always going to be fucked and was doing his best with what he had. Perhaps the delay to the Great Crusade so he could raise the Primarchs naturally would have allowed a more powerful force in the galaxy to rise, or for Chaos to dominate prematurely. Perhaps for the Primarchs to be effective forces of nature, they needed to grow up on their own homeworlds, and the Emperor raising them himself may have greatly capped their potential. We don't really know, but it is refreshing to read a story about a potential future that is bright and hopeful, especially since I just read the part of the End and Death Part 2 where Sanguinius gets bludgeoned to death like a disobedient dog, choking on his own blood while his face hangs off like a wet rag. I need a hug. If you enjoyed the video and you want to support the channel, then Patreon is the place to be, where we not only have a boatload of Battle Mace 40 million not suitable for work artwork, but also some nude cosplay photos and some custom 40k fan art wallpapers. Join the Discord for more memes and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.